This video presentation is brought to you by America's Promise Ministries, a national Christian outreach ministry which has been teaching and proclaiming the Jacob Israel truth message for over 23 years. We are proud to present this special presentation.
The title of my talk tonight is Sagas. I'm not going to be serious tonight. I think I've been serious enough around. I thought I'd play around with you a little bit tonight. A question was asked me some time ago, what kind of songs did you used to sing when you were growing up in Virginia? Virginia's kind of an unusual place. My daddy grew up near Hoskins Creek down at Dunsville. And during his lifetime as a boy, it was 40 miles to Richmond. It would take longer going to Richmond by horse and buggy overland than it would be to get on a boat at Rappahannock River, go all the way down to the mouth of the river, go across Hampton Roads, go all the way up to James River to Richmond. And it would be a whole lot easier. It was an awfully rough road to Richmond. And it's only been in my father's generation that the roads went down there. And so the people are all interbred. Most Virginians of Tidewater look like. It's funny. They sort of look alike. And they used to all talk alike. You know, they all say, there's a mouse about the house and there's no doubt about it, you know. Well, there was nobody there to convince them that was wrong. Now, they're getting into schools and they're doing a pretty good job of that now, but for a long time, everybody said that, and to say out and mouse and house and, you know, strange things like that. Now, that was something new that's come in Virginia, although lots of people are doing that. Well, my mother played the piano. She took music at Cincinnati Conservatory, and we used to gather around the piano and sing. And we'd sing all sorts of songs, and most of the songs we'd sing were story songs. They just weren't songs, they meant something. And I've done this for kids lots of times, so you're the biggest kids I've done it to. So, the song London Bridge, now y'all remember that, London Bridge. Now, just think now, that's an old song. That's a Viking song. That comes from the Vikings. And they would come up the Thames River to London and the dragon ships. And London Bridge was fortified. And they had big rocks on the bridge, and they had catapults, and they had great thick walls and everything. And they had buckets of water in case they set it on fire. It was fortified. And the dragon ships were also fortified. They would put boards up to form a V over them. So when they dropped those big rocks on them, you hit the boards, and, you know, they would bounce off. And what they would do is they would row up there, row up until they get up underneath the bridge, and they'd throw their anchors around the pilings, and they would pay off downriver, and they'd get on the oars, and they would sing. And this is the song. London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down. I'll get your fair lady. Now, those were the original words, you see. So there is something to these kids' songs. They're not songs, they're story songs. There's another one. We remember of this awful plague in London and throughout England. Now, we were in Virginia, and mostly we were untouched in Virginia. But back there in London, back there in England, they lost 2/3 of the people, died. And we heard about it, and they had a song about it. This plague, it was, I'm forgotten, I think it was the bubonic plague. It would have a big red spot, and they would call then there would be a ring, a white ring around this red spot. And then it would come up into a carbuncle type of thing and burst and smell awful. And they would put ashes on it, you know, to dry it up. And this was the song. Ring around the rosy. And then they would put rose petals in their pockets to disguise the smell. Pockets full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. And that is the story of Ring Around the Roses. I thought you'd find that interesting. Now, the oldest song that we know anything about in the English language, you already know. It's a Crusader song, and this goes back to the year 1000. And this is a song. It doesn't have the words, because I don't know what the original words were, but I know the words they have today. But I do know the melody, and you know the melody too, and it's a Crusader song. And just ignore the words I'm going to be singing, and just think of some brave, bold words that I don't know what they were, but just imagine I'm singing brave, bold words to this melody. The bear went over the mountain, the bear went over the mountain, the bear went over the mountain to see what he can see. The other side of the mountain, you've heard it. That is a Crusader song, and it is one of the oldest songs in Christendom. And I thought you might find that interesting too. So you know more than you thought you did about some of these old songs, don't you now? Well, now, most Virginians, now you see, most of y'all come from Virginia, at least once removed. Our counties were West Virginia, Kentucky, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And that was all settled from Virginia. And all of you got granddaddies that came from Virginia. And that means if you got granddaddies that came from Virginia, they're bound to be either Covenanters, or Huguenots, or some of the German refugees. And your roots are back home where I live. And one of the songs that we've always paid a great deal of respect to is the song of John Knox. Now that John Knox, he was something else again. He was a Catholic preacher. And he really got upset over what was going on in the Catholic Church, because he was one of the few who were allowed to read the Bible. Now remember, if you read the Bible, just went out and just read it, you know, they'd burn you up at a stake, see, and that discouraged reading. Besides, it was hard to get hold of. You just couldn't go down to the corner drugstore and pick one up just any time you wanted to. You had them in the church there, and it was written in Latin, and most people didn't know Latin, but he did. And he was all upset over what the Bible said and what the church was doing. And he got so upset that he had to leave England. And they caught him, and they put him on one of those galleys. Now, a galley is a place that you go to die. And they'll nail you in the seat. And there you stay until they take the chains off to throw you overboard when you're dead. But he had some friends in powerful places that after serving there, I think for a full year, he was out there. Now remember, this is John Knox. He was a great scholar. And he went on to Geneva. Well, Geneva was a city-state, and boy, they had some thinkers there. While he was there, he met Calvin, and he met Zwingli, all these people, and they put together the Geneva Bible while he was there. And the Geneva Bible with all the notes and everything, now that's the Bible that came back to England. The Geneva Bible. It was written back there while he was over in Geneva. And he came back to England, and when he arrived back in England, he was the only person in the British Isles that thought the way he thought. And the day he died, everybody in the British Isles thought the way he thought. That man was something else. He sent out pamphlets, he sent out tracts, he wrote all the time. I've never gone very many places, and I feel so bad because of that. I went to Mexico a couple of times, and I almost got stuck by a bayonet down there by a Mexican soldier. That's worth a story sometime. I'll tell you that. And I did go to Scotland for 2 weeks, and I went to Lincoln, England, where the Lincoln Cathedral is, for a week to see the cathedral. It takes a week to see that cathedral. It's a great big cathedral. But anyway, while I was in Glasgow, I went up. There's this house that's built out into the street. When they built this avenue and straightened the avenue out, John Knox's house was in the way, but they didn't touch that house. They left it. So you got this house sticking out maybe 20 feet out into the street. That's John Knox's house. And you go in there, and the door sills about this. You'll bump your head if you're not careful in it. So evidently, it was a real interesting house. He was a real interesting fellow. He wrote a song, and I think in many respects it's my favorite song. And it goes like this. And you've got to remember that he had lots going against him, and he was scared to death lots of times when he went to bed at night. He didn't know whether or not he was going to be taken up to the castle. I had a couple of granddaddies had their heads cut off up at Edinburgh Castle, and it's the smell of blood is about the place. And this is his song. A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. Our helper he amid the flood of mortal ills prevailing. But still our ancient foe doth seek to work us woe. His power and strength are great, and armed with cruel hate. On earth is not his equal. Now that song was picked up and sung all over Britain. It started a series of wars to straighten out the evils that had been done. And it's not over yet. Perhaps that might be the song of our movement eventually. I don't know. I really think our song hasn't been written yet, but I think it will be written in the days ahead. Somebody somewhere is going to write the song of our movement. In 1715, now here's another song. We used to get around the piano, and Mama would say, "Now, son, shut up and listen." and she would go over the words. And these were the words. She says, "Son, I want you to remember these words the way I'm telling you. Not the way they sound or the way they're pronounced. I want you to sing them this way. Way, hey, 100 pipers and da, 100 pipers and da, we'll and give 'em a blow, well, 100 pipers and da, me Highland lad look bra, with his tot and kilt and da, with shining gun and glitter and gear, and pub rock sounding sweet and clear. Oh, it's all the borders away, it's all the borders away. We'll march to Carlisle, ha, with its sheets, its castles, and And she says, she says, now that's the song your granddaddy was marching to when he marched into England in the rising of the 15th. Now his daddy commanded the right wing of the Scottish army. And they caught him, and they put a chain around his neck, and they put him in a slave ship, and they sold him into Virginia. And his daddy was taken to, it wasn't Newgate, it was another prison in London, I've forgotten the name of it. And he was sentenced to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. How many of you know what that means? Well, not enough of you. When you hang somebody, in that day and time there was a sentence. Britain was in 4 quarters. Scotland, England, Wales, and Ireland. And then later they added Virginia. It was then it was 5 quarters. And they would take a man that had committed treason, and they would hang him until he lost consciousness, and they'd cut him down, throw water in his face, and then they would remove his entrails while he was standing there and burn him before his face, and then they would pull his head over and cut his head off, and then they'd take a bill hook and they would quarter him, and they'd send each quarter to each of the 4 realms. And that was his sentence. It's a right tough sentence. My granddaddy arrived down at Yorktown. It was up there on a block to be sold with a chain on his neck. And his cousin, who was governor down there, he bought his indenture and sent him up to Germantown in Virginia to learn to be a surveyor for him. So he was fortunate. So many others weren't so fortunate. In Glasgow, while I was up there, I saw a statue of Sir William Wallace. Sir William Wallace. Sir William Wallace, Scotland had been conquered by England, and it was occupied, garrisoned. And Sir William Wallace was coming home one night, and he saw a gentleman beset by a bunch of rogues who were trying to kill him. And he didn't have time to fish around his pocket to find a nickel so he could call the proper authorities so they could come up there and save this fellow, see. So he jumped in himself, and he killed a couple of the attackers. It just so happened they were British soldiers. And the man gave him, this man had a chest in his hand, and he made off. And Sir William Wallace tended to his business, and he went on home too. Didn't think anything of it. But the British occupation forces found out who it was. And they went and they found, they arrived at his home. And his wife was pregnant and in bed. And they broke right on in the house. And the Englishman, commander of the unit, he killed Sir William Wallace's wife when she wouldn't divulge where he was, and outlawed Sir William Wallace. And he went into the hills. And gradually people started coming to Sir William Wallace. And his band grew and grew and grew. And before you know it, he was attacking patrols of British soldiers. And after that, small forts. Then after that, towns. And after that, cities. And the cry of Sir William Wallace was heard throughout Scotland. He's the savior of Scotland, Sir William Wallace. When I say the name, I'll tell you, my body tingles to this very day. If you've got a drop of Scotch blood in you, it'll do that. Now here I am, English, Scotch, you see. So I have loyalties both ways, and I can speak for and against both. I have the right. Now, he won. He was a master warrior. He caught the English army split, and he attacked the wing that was on this side of the river and annihilated them and won the independence for Scotland. He could have been king, but he turned the crown over to Robert Dunbar, who was Robert the Bruce, and became his loyal man. And the British offered a treaty, a truce, to come and talk things over, and Sir William Wallace took them at their word, and while at the truce, they took him prisoner and sentenced him to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. And before the sentence was carried out, he had a beautiful, beautiful young girl that had come to see him oftentimes while he was in prison. And they decided to get married just before he was to be killed. And she went back home, and she wrote this song. Oh, you take the high road, and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland before ye. But me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. And that's where that song comes from. That's got quite a history to it, quite a history. And up there in Glasgow, while I go out early in the morning, maybe some of y'all see me, I wake up at 5 o'clock and I have to get out. And I take my walks, and birds are something special to me. They sort of talk to me. And I came by this statue, and there was nobody there. A statue of Sir William Wallace on this horse. And there was a British soldier here with his hand on the bridle. There was a British sailor over here with his hand on the bridle. There was a British airman back here with his hand on the saddle. And there was a British merchant marine back here with his hand on the horse like this. And they were looking up at Sir William Wallace. And that was the war memorial. And I can't think of a more fitting one. You travel throughout Scotland, and every little hamlet has this pathetic little monument in there covered with names of Scottish soldiers killed in the wars, all the wars. The 78th down at New Orleans was lined up to attack the American positions down there. You know, Jackson was, when his backwoodsmen were defending New Orleans, and in front of his cotton bale fortification was a canal. There was no way the British could have gotten to him, but they didn't know that. And they marched forward, you know. The 78th Scottish Regiment lost 2,000 men in New Orleans. I went into the headquarters up there. It's in this castle between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and there, the list of the names of those that fell in New Orleans. I'll declare, there was something else again. Down at Yorktown, well, I'll touch on that in just a little while. Later on, just a few years later, that was the rising of the 1715. That sent the first wave of Scots over Virginia. The second wave came with Bonnie Prince Charlie. And that, they lost that. And then there was the raising and the clearances and the burned the villages. I've looked out in the meadows, the green, lush meadows with the rock walls going over, and they're the foundations. You see the cobblestone streets going all over, leading nowhere. And the foundations with no houses, they're all gone. They went in the 1745 when they burned everything out and sent everything out. The Campbells, for instance, went to Ireland. They're Scotch-Irish. But that's another story. I'll get to that in just a second. So many, old man Lynchburg, he came from, he was Scotch-Irish. Stopped in Scotland, came on to Lynchburg and founded the town. His brother Charles was a clerk in the courts, British courts. And when the war started, they ran all the British preachers and judges out, and they had to have some judge, so they named Charles as a judge. And he held court under the tree in his yard, and they called that the lynch tree, and everybody went down to Charles Lynch's house to be lynched. And he never hanged anybody. No one was ever hanged down there. But that's where the lynch law comes from. It's just 20 miles south of Lynchburg. Sometimes the part of the tree is still standing. It'll be of interest to you to see that perhaps. Anyway, claymore. You've heard the word claymore. It's different. A basket-hilted sword is about that long, see? And it's got a big basket here to protect your hand. A claymore is something different. A claymore is a big sword, a great big two-handed sword. It has a hilt going forward like that, and on the blade it has a prong forward so somebody can't slide their sword up your blade and get to you that way. And you pick a big man to wield the claymore with both hands. And he's not alone. Each claymore requires two soldiers, one on his right and one on his left to protect him. And the claymore wielder gets in there and does his thing, you see. And he has his soldiers to guard him at all times. And after that, after the battles, Bonnie Prince Charlie was getting out of there, see. And he was on the ship. He was going to Sky Island. And they wrote this Sky Island song. And I can remember Mama explaining this to me many a time. And she says, now this is the Sky Island song. The Sky Island song. It was always one word. I didn't know what she was talking about. It was a Sky Island song. It goes this. Sail, bonny ship, away on the sea, on with the sailors cry. Bury the lad who is born to be king, over the sea to sky. Many's the lad fought on that day, well the claymore could wield. When the night came, silently lay dead on Culloden's field. That's a Sky Island song. Oh yes, you hear the Sky Island song. It's really part of Scotland. And the song that we have, God Save the King, we know the story of the Covenanters and how they refused to say God Save the King when God made each of us a king and a priest. Each of us. And we have our obligations as kings and priests. And rather than say, God save the king, they stood still and took a bullet in the head with his wife and children looking on. And the Covenanters and their children and their wives were hunted down in the hills and killed like animals. And here's a song, and if the British subjects here, begging your pardon, it's a song I don't particularly like because of things I connect it with, and I don't even know that I sing it correctly, but it's a song I was taught as a boy. I said, I don't want to learn the song. He said, it doesn't make any difference what you want to learn. You're going to learn that song. So, so it goes like this. God save our noble King, long to reign over us. God save the King. Happy, victorious, long to reign over us. God save our noble King. God save the King. Now, I've met the Queen. Let me tell you how that happened. I was going to law school down in William and Mary, and really that was one big mistake. I was in constitutional law down there, and there, you study and you study and you take forever to get every bit of truth you can, and then you make your mind up. And then the professor says, now, I want you to take the other side of the argument. What other side of the argument? After you've gone all that trouble to make your mind up, right's right, wrong's wrong, black is black, and white's white, You just can't do that. I just wasn't cut out for a lawyer. There's just no way. I was lost. I was down there in the student body, and the Queen Mother came up. And she was a little woman about this tall, and she had a blue hat on, and she had a blue veil on, and she had a blue dress on, and she had blue stockings on and blue shoes. I never saw blue stockings before in my life before then. And she had the bluest blue eyes that you ever saw. And she walked up the walk, and a gracious lady she was. And she walked right up to me and looked me right in the face. And she said, and how do you like this? How do you like it here? And you know what I said? Just fine, ma'am. What do you say to the Queen, huh? So that's the extent of my conversation to the Queen, but I've met the Queen. So I just threw that in for free. Now, I got something important to tell you. Back here in Scotland, I seem to be talking an awful lot about Scotland, don't I? Well, there's a lot. Virginia owes a lot to the Scots, and not much is written in the history books about them. You see, back there in Scotland, it was a poor country, and the Scottish chiefs prided themselves in bringing in the best teachers in the whole world. And they prided on the competition of who had the best teachers and who had the best educated people and clansmen. Now, if you wanted to, you could take your education as far as you wanted to. It was nothing extraordinary at all to find some little dirty sheep herder on the top of a hill, and if there's anything dirty and herding sheep, I don't know what it is. They're dirty, dirty, stinking animals. Now, any little sheep herder, a shepherd, up on a hillside, knew Latin, Greek, Hebrew, could do his numbers, geometry, trigonometry, and there was thought nothing of. Everybody could do it. These are the people that came in by the shiploads down to Yorktown to be sold into the plantations. And they bought them, worked them out there in the fields beside the darkies, hoeing tobacco, until they found out that these Scottish prisoners of war were a lot smarter than the owners of the plantation. So they brought them in and set up schools. Now I'm talking about, listen to the dates, 1715 and 1745. Along about 1750, this was going strong. And by that time, it was no trick at all to find people all over Virginia, including the Englishman named Hoskins, for instance, who could speak Latin and Greek and Hebrew and do their geometry and trigonometry. They taught people like Tom Jefferson. They taught people like George Washington and Patrick Henry to say there's a mouse about the house and there's no doubt about it, comes right straight out of Scotland. They taught them to hate the guts out of the British. So they taught them as much as they could carry. And that's the reason you had your Revolutionary War, because of what happened back in Scotland. I thought you'd find that interesting too. Now, the war, the Revolutionary War, I live on this road there. Everything's so, we've never gone anywhere. I really haven't wanted to go anywhere, if you want to know the truth. But we've never gone anywhere. We've always been in the same place. We haven't lost our records because everything's there. On this road, it's called the Lexington-Salem New London Turnpike. Now, New London, it's got 8 houses there. At one time, they said New London was going to be bigger than New York. Back there during the Revolution, they had 2,000 or 3,000 people there, all sorts of warehouses and everything else. And this road, right in front of my house, is the old turnpike. And on that road, I'll tell you right now, Indians have been on that road, marching up and down it. I know for a fact that the militia companies fighting the Indians have been up and down it. British soldiers have been up and down it. German soldiers and Hessians have been up and down it. We've had Confederate cavalry, Confederate infantry. We've had Yankee cavalry, Everybody has gone up and down that road at one time, right there in front of my house. Now, we had some Hessian soldiers going by, and we got these great oaks there. And those great oaks have heard this. And you know what those Hessian soldiers were singing back there then? They were singing their song. And these were Brandenburg soldiers, excuse me. These Brandenburg soldiers were singing this song. Merki Shahida. Let me sing it in English, and then I'll sing it in German. You decide which sounds a little better. Marching through prairies, marching through sand, boom, 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 is the marcher's pleasure. In his homeland, boom, 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 is the marcher's pleasure. In his homeland, fly high, you red eagle, high over swamp and sand. High over dark green forest, hail you, my Brandenburger land. High over dark green forest, hail you, my Brandenburger land. Now this is the way it sounds in German. You see, I don't speak German, but it sounds entirely different to me. Märkische Heide, märkische Song, bum, 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 singt des Märkers Freude, singt sein Heimatland, bum, 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 singt des Märkers Freude, singt sein Heimatland, Steiger ho, du rote Adler, hoch über Sumpf und Sand. Hoch über Donkey-Keepern Bay, hey, da heil der mein Brandenburger Land. Hoch über Donkey-Keepern Bay, hey, da heil der mein Brandenburger Land. Now that comes right straight from the Revolutionary War, yeah? Well, now, we had some other troops marching up and down the road. They got, you see, in the British Queen's Own, now everybody belongs to England now, see, or to Britain. It's the United Kingdom, they call it. That's the most diverse, separated, united thing I've ever seen in my life. Up there in Scotland, when I was up there, they got a song saying we're gonna cut old Scotland and sail her away. You know, from England. Up there, they got 3 flags. You know, they don't have, in Virginia, we got the United States jack up at the top, and then we got the Virginia flag, captured flag underneath it. That's how they fly our flags in Virginia. We're captured, and we know it, see? We're occupied. Over there, it ain't exactly so. They got 3 flags, and it's in a triangle, and 2 of them are Scottish flags, you see? Now, you don't know for a fact which is on the right, depending on which direction you're coming up from those flags on, see? Sometimes the British flag might be on the right, but there's 2 chances out of 3 it ain't. See? Well, the same is true down there in Wales. The Welsh, these people named Jones, they're separate and different people. They're different. They know things, and they have a way with things, and they have an insight that other people don't have to this very day. Now, they had this castle down there in Wales, and they fought for their independence, and they fought hard. And the name of this castle was Harlech Castle. and they had their song went like this. And they fought long and hard for their independence. Men of Harlech in the hollow, do ye hear like rushing billow? Wave on wave that surging follows, battle's distant sound. 'Tis the tramp of Saxon foemen, Saxon spearmen, Saxon bowmen. Be they knights or hinds or yeomen, they shall bite the ground. Loose the foes asunder, brag we conquer under. The placid sky, now bright on high, shall loose its bolts in thunder. Onward, 'tis the country needs us, he is bravest, he who leads us. Honor self, now proudly heads us, freedom, God, and right. Now that's the song of the Welsh Guards. Now isn't that a song and a half? I've always thought that was wonderful. They've got another one now. Now all of these are songs of our people. And this is called the British Grenadier. Now, I had a granddaddy down at Yorktown. He served with the 1st Continental Line. It was the 1st Virginia Regiment before that. The Richmond Light Infantry Blues, that was later my regiment. My father joined that regiment, and I joined that regiment. And it's just gone out of existence 15 years ago. After all these years, to have a fine old regiment like that go out of existence, it's a tragedy. But anyway, the British Grenadier song goes like this. Some speak of Alexander and some of Hercules, of Hector and Lysander and such great men as these. Of all the world forgotten, there's none that can hold sway. The British Grenadier. And it goes on with the verses about how you light the grenades and light the fuses and throw them over the glacis into the forts. Outside of the fortifications at Yorktown, they had 2 redoubts, number 9 and number 10. And my granddaddy was one of them. His name is Robert Hoskins. I name a boy Robert, just because the name's too good to waste. And early one morning, they came with the muskets unloaded, and they threw the grenades over the walls, and they went right on in after them. But that's the British Grenadier. Now, in a second, I want to tell you how the British Grenadier, you know those big bearskin hats they got on? Have you ever wondered where those came from? Well, if like I am, you never even thought of it. But they got those big bearskin caps, and there's a reason they got it. It comes from the phrase, you've heard of people say, well, it's time to face the music. Do you know where that comes from? Well, that's an interesting story. There was a fellow named Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, he was all man. He really was all man. And his regiments, most of them, all of his regiments marched to band music. They marched in step. The only regiments in the world that ever marched in step that I know about, all of them, wherever Napoleon's armies went, they went in step, and the regiments marched in step. And the song they took was a song of the Revolution. It was a revolutionary song, but by the time he got it, he turned it into a song of empire. And the French really thought that Napoleon hung the moon. They really did. They would literally die for that man. And I don't know the French words for it, and I'm not sure about the English ones. But these, I'm thinking back, these, to best of my knowledge, this is what I was taught. Yes, sons of France, awake to glory, hark what merits bid your eyes. The house of children, da 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 da. 'Tis here the cries, da 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 da. Here are the cries. A hateful tyrant's mischief breeding, a hireling host, a ruffian band, affright and desolate the land, while peace and liberty lie bleeding. To arms, ye brave, to arms this glorious day. March on, all hearts resolved on victory or death. Now, can you picture now? You are in line, and your sergeant said, all right, son, it's time to face the music. And on the other side of the hill, you hear, and then you start seeing a few little dots on the road going up and down like that, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And here comes a column of men marching up the hill in full line, and they're marching in perfect step, coming right straight to you. And all of a sudden, the band breaks into the music. Ba-bum, ba-bum, bum, 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 ba-bum, ba-bum, bum, bum, bum. That's time to face the music. And that's where the song comes from. In the whole British Army, in the whole French Army, there were many, many heroes that fought in many, many battles. They had many heroes. But the greatest of the heroes of them all, they selected out and put in Napoleon's own personal Guards regiments. And you had to be a hero, number one, to be in it. And once you were in the Guards regiments, you got the best of uniforms, best of food, best of everything. And you were expected to pay the price if necessary. When the time came in a crisis, the Guards were put in, and the Guards always won. And at Waterloo, I wish I had time to go into that. The battle was going on right here. Napoleon was going right straight forward, and he had the British whipped. And over on the right came Blucher and the Germans. And they were marching to the song, boom, boom, ba-dum, boom, 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 boom. Same one that played in Virginia 50 years earlier. And being hit on the flank and in front at the same time. You know, it was all over. And they surrounded the Guards regiments. Napoleon ordered them forward, and they went forward. And there they were, the Guards regiments. And they wouldn't yield. Against tens of thousands, they wouldn't yield. They would not yield. And British went forward with a flag on a white flag on the sword and said, please surrender to avoid the further effusion of blood. You are surrounded. There's no hope. And the word came back. The Guard dies. It does not surrender. And they died. To a man. The French Guard. And their great bearskin caps, the British put them on. And when you see the British marching by with the bearskin caps that belong to the French heroes, well, maybe that's a sign of victory. I don't know. I think that's flaunting a little bit. I think the French Guard deserved a little better than that. Back in Virginia, we had a fella. Oh, I don't want to get to Virginia yet, because we had a charge of the Scotch Guards. The ladies from hell with their kilts. And this is the song they marched to. This is the band music. Drums in my heart are drumming, I hear the pipes are humming, my bonny lady is over the sea. Somewhere ship and crew sail in the ocean blue, bringing my bonny to me. That's why the drums are drumming, that's why the pipes are humming, my bonny laddie is coming to me. Drums in my heart are drumming, I hear the pipes are humming, my bonny laddie is coming to me. And that was their song at the Battle of Waterloo. And they marched to it to this very day. It brings out special memories when you hear it. But back in Virginia, we had a man called Lew Wetzel. Le vent de la mort, the wind of death. He was a one-man army. He is the one who saved Virginia. He kept Virginia from being destroyed by the Indians. And whenever I think of Lew Wetzel's death wind, you see the peaks of Otter are right outside of town. These are the holy mountains of the Indians. The peaks of Otter. The word otter, it doesn't mean an animal. It has some Indian name that we don't know what it means. But at the foot of it, that's where the Iroquois and Algonquins fought. And goodness knows how many thousands of Indians have killed each other at the base of the mountains. But these two blue mountains are always in the background. It's always in everybody's mind who lives in our part of the country. The peaks of Otter. And beyond that is where death wind moves. The one who was never seen, whose rifle was never empty. But when I think of him, this is what I think of. Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles in der Welt. Bin ich stets zu Schutz und Trutze, brüderlich zusammenhält. Von der Mast bis an der Memo, von der Reich bis an der Welt. Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles in der Welt. Now, that song, Deutschland über alles, I was taught that in the 1930s. I was taught that because they said, this is one of the songs of our people. I can remember that long ago. We have Germantown, we have our German settlers in the valley, we have Lew Wetzel, we have our German heritage in Virginia. Now, there's one thing I've got to touch on. It's the Catholics in Ireland. I like them. I really do. They are argumentative, cantankerous bunch of people. I'll declare they are. The way that, of course, they've been aggravated a little bit too. This guy, Oliver Cromwell, he invaded Ireland, and the things he did to the Irish were simply terrible. And I mean, he would go into towns and kill every man, woman, and child in many of the towns. And finally, he had so much trouble with them in Northern Ireland, he cleared the land and brought in Scots from Scotland who were being dispossessed up there and brought them into Northern Ireland. And the Irish in the south, Catholics, saw the people who were on their lands, these Protestants, Presbyterian Protestants, and they hated their guts. Neither one thinking for 1 second, who owns the land, you see. The crown back in England, or the people who own the crown, the bankers who owned the king, owned all the land in Northern and Southern Ireland. And if they would ever stop and think for 1 second who it was that actually owns the land over there, I think maybe, they would give this thing just another thought. But anyway, they got a song. They got lots of songs. One of the songs that started a war, another war, was this one. Oh, you've heard this 1,000 times. Oh, Patty dear, and did you hear the news that's gone round? The shamrock is forbid by lot to grow on Irish ground. St. Patrick's name no more you'll hear, his colors can't be found. They're hanging men and women for the wearing of the green. And over here in America, they heard that song and they believed every word of it, And you'd be surprised having American Irish went back over there to fight with them. But they have a song of their own, these Catholic Irish. And here it is. Come all ye gallant Irishmen who'd set your country free, ye true-born sons of Erin Isle who'd fight for liberty. Come gather round the band of boys and drink a glass with me, and we'll drink a toast to Ireland boys wherever we may be. Some died on the burning sands in the sunny land of Spain, and some were forced to emigrate across the raging main. There's many a sound of great renown who tells our history, and we'll drink a toast to Ireland boys wherever we may be. Someday we'll return again and see our native home. Beneath the flag of green, me boys, never more to roam. We'll drink a dram to every man who fights for liberty, and we'll drink a toast to Ireland boys wherever we may be. Now, I think that's a real nice song, even if it is a Catholic, terrorist, warlike song. Excuse me. In Virginia, we got our heroes, and one of them is John Pelham. John Pelham, I've seen his picture. I used to have it hanging in my room. He was a young, blonde-haired boy, maybe 23 years old, and he was slight and real polite, real nice boy from Alabama. And he was a major, just 23 years old, and a major of Stewart's Horse Artillery. And let me tell you what he did. They were getting ready to have this battle up there at Fredericksburg, and General Lee was up on the Mary's Heights overlooking the plains, and then there was Fredericksburg, and then there was the river, Rappahannock River, and on the other side of the Rappahannock River were 200 federal guns. All of those guns outgunned anything we had. And on Mary's Heights, we had a few guns, not nearly like 200 guns. And the whole Union Army crossed the river, and they were all lined up, ready to attack. And General Lee needed some time to bring up some regiments, because they had a big gap in the line, and it had been real bad if the Yankees had attacked just about that time. So John Pelham said, I'll give you the time. So what did John Pelham do? He hooked his horses up, he hooked his cannons up, and he galloped out to one side of the Union Army. He unlimbered those guns, he turned those guns around, put charges in and pushed them home like that, and he fired these shells, with the fuses still burning. the length of the Union Army. He was right on one end of it, on the flank, and those cannonballs were hopping and jumping and sputtering, and they would go all the way up, and the Union Army, the soldiers would see those cannonballs hopping up and down on the ground, and they were getting out of the way, and then they would blow up, and a few men would be killed. And can you imagine what would happen to the lines? And he would shoot 2 or 3 times, and then he would hook the guns up to his horses and move real fast to another place. And where he had been, all 200 guns of the Federal Army, and they were right on top of him. He was real close. I've been up there and looked down. I said, "Good Lord Almighty, that man was crazy." Where he would be, no sooner he got over there, and a torrent of shell just tore the ground all to pieces where he had been. If he had been there, just nothing would be left. And there he was over popping away with his guns, doing the same thing. And then he would hook the guns up and move right back to where he was, where they just shot it all to pieces, And they would have to move their guns around and everything else. He played cat and mouse out there for 15 minutes before the whole Federal Army and before the whole Confederate Army, and completely demoralized the attack. Took them an hour to get the soldiers straight again. And when he rode off the field, General Stewart told him, "Boy, you get that gun off. You get those guns off before you get killed." And he brought them on back. And the Federal Army cheered him, and the Confederate Army cheered him. Now, if you're going to do something great, that's nice to have an audience. You know that? Well, that's John Pelham. John Pelham was killed in our backyard at Kelly's Ford. He took part in a cavalry charge down there. A shell went off, hit him right there in the back of the head. And they brought him up to Lynchburg, brought him up to Culpeper, and right across from the hotel where my granddaddy's store was the Pelham house. And he died on the 2nd floor. And I used to always look, that's the house, that's the Pelham house, and that's the room that he died in. I can always remember that. Now, our cavalry leader was a fellow named Jeb Stewart. Oh, goodness, I got 3 minutes. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to fast. He had a red beard down to here, and he'd throw the folds of his uniform back, and there would be red on this uniform. And he was a rolling, rollicking, fighting cavalryman. His hat was turned up, and he had a plume in it, and he would ride down the streets of Richmond with his staff, and this is the song they would be singing. Incidentally, this is the national anthem of the Confederacy. Now, just picture this early in the morning, Jeb Stewart galloping down the streets of Richmond, and the doors opening up, and the windows opening up, and everybody wanted to say, if that was Jeb Stewart, and goodness gracious, you had to know it was. We are a band of brothers, and native to the soil, fighting for our liberty with treasure, blood, and toil. And when our rights were threatened, the cry rose far and near. Hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. We killed 300,000 before they conquered us. I wished it was 3 million instead of what we got. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. Now, if you're going to have a national anthem, you have a good one, I'd like to tell you about the VMI cadets attacking up there across the battlefields at Newmarket. And I'd like to tell you about the little boy blues, the little kids, the sons of the blues. The little kids. I've only got 1 minute.
We'll give you some more time.
The VMI cadets, Virginia Military Institute. These boys were called out because we didn't have anybody else. They had to be called up. They fought the battle of Lynchburg, and then they went right on. They burned VMI in Lexington, and they burned Liberty City, Bedford, and they came on to Lynchburg, and we beat them off right there at the city limits of Lynchburg. That's another story too. But the cadets went on back up to Lexington because they were needed real fast. And there were 5 miles north of Lexington is a place called Newmarket. And on this hill, there was a Union battery that commanded the whole Confederate position. And these boys lined up and started across this long, long plain. It must have been 600 yards. And they tell me that the Yankee gunners had tears in their eyes because they could see the kids coming up there as they were shooting them down, you know. But they came on in with a bayonet and took the hill, and they won the battle. Now, that's VMI. And when little VMI doesn't have many students up there, but they'll fight big BPI at these football games. And BPI's got thousands of students, you know, and they got these great big giants and everything playing with them. And the VMI cadets are just little people. And they always get stomped, except every now and then, you see. And every now and then, that little VMI team will beat the stuffings out of everybody. They really will. You just never know when VMI is going to play. And their song is, oh, when their line starts to weaken, our backs fail to gain. Our ends are so crippled till wind seems in vain. The core roots the loudest will yet win the day. The team it will rally and fight, fight, fight. Ray will turn on the line and we'll circle the ends. The red, white, and yellow will triumph again. The cadets will fight 'em and never say die. That's the spirit of VMI. They went back up at the New Market, dug up all those boys there and took them down there to VMI, and they buried them there. That's where they're buried right now. You can go to VMI. When you come through Virginia, stop at Lexington, see General Lee's grave, see Stonewall Jackson's grave, and see those boys' graves. All that at VMI. It'll be worth your time. Now, at Richmond, they had this guy named Colonel Dahlgren. He had a 2,000-man picked force. He was going to storm Richmond and burn it to the ground. And they didn't have any spare troops at all except the Little Boy Blues. That's all. And the Little Boy Blues had, you know, commanders, one arm, one leg, you know. That was it. And the Little Boy Blues lined up there, and they said that when Colonel Dahlgren's troops saw them, they just laughed and laughed and laughed. And the muskets were so heavy that they stood way above the little boys, way above it. And they lined Colonel Dahlgren's troops up for a cavalry charge. And then they told them to present muskets, and they turned sideways. And the muskets so heavy they couldn't hold them up. So they rested them on the barrels on the ground. And they told them to stand easy. And at the charge, they waited until the charge reached as far as from here to that door there. Now, that's not very far at all. And they said, present, fire! And that's point-blank range. And they wiped the first line of Dahlgren's men completely out. And the Little Boy Blues went forward with the bayonet and the charged bayonet. And you know they broke up that whole attack? Those Little Boy Blues, Richard? They're sons of my regiment, you know. That's one of our stories of our regiments, the sons of the Little Boy Blues. Dahlgren retreated down there to King Queen County, where the old men and the boys' regiment down there took care of the rest of them down there. Now, that's a story that shouldn't be forgotten. And also the boys of Petersburg. They held the trenches for the first day, and 3/4 of them died at Petersburg. And I've seen pictures of the 10-year-old kids and 9-year-old kids. That's something else. This one little thing I want to stop. When the retreat started, all these old men had been working as clerks in Richmond. They took part in a retreat at Richmond, and they got caught there at Sailor's Creek, where the army got cut in half in two. We didn't have very many left. And my wife's granddaddy, he was caught in there too. And these old men, they didn't know any better. They had always told that the way to fight was to cheer and give the rebel yell and charge Yankees, and they'd always run. And when they got charged at, you know, up there, they gave the order to the old men, and I'm talking about men 60 and 70 and 80 years old. They told them to turn around, that they were going to have to whip the Yankees. And they turned around, and they gave a rebel yell, and they cheered, and they ran the Yankees back by a whole half a mile. I don't know how many died of heart attacks and everything else. But that is what a cause will do if you know you're right. These old men, they beat the Yankee army for a whole half a mile. It couldn't be done, but they did it. Now, this, and I'm going to say, the most thrilling thing that ever happened to me, and I think in my whole lifetime, I was camped on the battlefield of Manassas on the way back from Indiantown Gap Military Reservation. It was raining on us, and it was cold, and the pup tents and everything were pitched out. And we all was soaking wet, and it was cold, and the night was long, and we all standing around talking and miserable. Only as a soldier knows how miserable you can be when you're cold and wet, and there's no place to go to get warm. You just got to take it until the sun gets up, and you start marching again. Now, at the bottom of we were right on the battlefield. I knew the places and the different parts of the battle. And down at the bottom of the hill, I heard the bus down there, and I heard some voices down there, and I heard somebody say, "It's hut," and you hear that, and then they said, "Look, hut." We were wondering what in the dickens was going on, and then we heard click, 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 click. Ba-da-dum bum ba-da-da-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-da-da-da-dum ba-da-dum 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 bum ba-da-da-dum bum 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 ba-dum da-da-da-da-dum ba-da-dum ba-da-dum ba-da-dum. And you want to hear the men come out and the cheers in the middle of the night in the cold rain. It didn't make any difference. You should have heard the yells and the cheers of that, and the rest of the night was warm again. That, I think, was the most thrilling experience that I've ever had in my life, and I've had a bunch of them. Thank you a whole lot. So I don't have any more time.